Good afternoon. Composition is a discipline within English that seeks not just to teach us how to write, but it seeks to teach us how to write authentically in the real world, about real world ideas and ideas that are tied to literature and the world of the past, in order to bring everything together in a cogent whole that can be readily understood and then subsequently disseminated by parties who are not even involved in the original discussion or research. Oh, and by the way, all of this must be communicated in a writing style that is appropriate to the audience, is grammatically perfect, okay, fine, correct, and is cognizant of the current issues affecting our world, our community, our audience, and in this case, however we are defining them, our students, who in the end need to be able to do all of the appropriate composing that we are attempting to teach. That's the definition of composition studies that I gleaned from reading Teaching English in the Two-Year College. Teaching English in the Two-Year College is the journal of the Two-Year College Association. It's for instructors of English studies in the Two-Year College. It publishes theoretical, practical articles across the range of English studies at the Two-Year College, including in composition, rhetoric, developmental education, technical and business communication, reading and literacy, literature, creative writing, language, dual and concurrent enrollment, as well as professional issues that are published in September, December, March, and May of each year. That actually came directly from the Teaching English in the Two-Year College website. In Teaching English in the Two-Year College, compositional studies is focused primarily on the first year composition class and the issues arising from such an introductory course. Because of this relatively specific area of interest from a compositional studies standpoint, this appeals to me. This is where my students are and where they will be for the foreseeable future, whether they're in my high school, pre-advanced or pre-AP placement classes, or in the dual credit off campus, because they're being taught in the high school building where I hope to be teaching. Or in a two-year school where I hope to be teaching after I retire from teaching high school. This journal addresses the issues closest to my professional heart. Thus, of all the journals referenced by Douglas Hess, I was drawn to Teaching English in the Two-Year College because it addresses the issues, again, nearest my interest. In Hess's article, Journals in Composition Studies, 35 years after, he references the earlier work by Robert J. Connors, which had been published in College English. Concerning Teaching English in the Two-Year College, Hess comments on Connors' characterization of the journal as being second tier, as unwarranted, unless one categorically dismisses teaching-focused articles as inferior. For me, without the focus in teaching, and more particularly without the focus on application, simply studying composition for its own sake does not have efficacy. Thus, this journal is the best mix of applicable ideas and academically reviewed scholarship. This publication is of and started out as a publication of the National Council of Teachers of English. Its mission statement is to promote the development of literacy, the use of language to construct personal and public worlds, and to achieve full participation in society through the learning and teaching of English and the related arts and sciences of language. To build an argument about what can be learned about the discipline of composition studies through analyzing the last 2 years of this particular journal, I'm going to hit a few points and try as much as I can to make sure that we're talking clearly about which issues is occurring. So, for example, one of the things that is clear is that this is a dynamic field of study that is heavily impacted by the trends of the day. Exempli gratis, social justice, COVID-19, EL and EB students, disabilities, computerization of research, and several others. So, for example, in the May 2022 issue, Poetry in the Pandemic was one of the articles, using a writer mentor to build confidence toward the idea of creating, again, better writers of composition. Another in the same issue was Drawing to Promote Engagement Leading to Better Composition. I particularly like this. I use this in my classroom. I have my students draw out complex stories as much as possible. Sometimes they do them in groups. And then when we go to write about it, they then turn those drawings into their compositions. Another same article, same issue, using the mother tongue as a resource for ESL students. The research behind this is, well, it's voluminous. It's how using L1 in order to improve L2 tends to make things much faster, which is why people who actually are learning languages as adults and then apply them learn it so much better, because by applying the new language's rules of grammar to an already existing grammatical structure makes the learning of a language that much easier. So we use this with our ESL students as much as possible. Discussions of the disabled about their experiences in collaborative writing from the March 2022 issue. In fact, this entire issue was dedicated to issues surrounding our students who have various kinds of disabilities, including disability visibility, first-person stories, and how we can make the rules of a classroom and the rules of writing more accessible to students who have some sort of disability, whether we're talking 504 or IEP. Also in this publication, there are practical modes of improving compositional and rhetorical skills that are addressed, particularly in the December 2021 issue. Some of the articles: teaching second semester composition through reflection on informal evaluations. Wonderfully helpful. Rather than just having the formal evaluation and a grade, how do we, as teachers, tell our students and help our students to develop better composition more informally, so there's not the heavy pressure on them. Another article: using career exploration as a compositional tool. I've been using this for years. I will start with my students and they'll actually explore careers and then write essays about the career that they've chosen based on research that they've done. It tends to create a great deal of engagement. Also leveraging students' former experience to improve compositions. I have my students actually write a name project, which I'd love to go into more detail, but that's beyond the scope of this particular presentation. And playing weekly writing accountability groups in introductory composition asynchronously, which yet another example of the impact of COVID-19 on our teaching and on teaching composition. This also talked about applying student-centered questions-based pedagogy in composition and literary courses. Though not composition per se, it also talked about reading literature with the students, reading alongside them. So I don't read it first as the teacher, but I read it with my students. A great article. I've used this same technique many times. It causes me to ask the same questions they're asking, and then we explore them together. Much more collaborative approach. To some of the insightful analysis patterns that I noticed. For example, during the pandemic, I dealt with both student issues of composition psychology. Trauma-informed writing pedagogy was one of the discussion topics, which one of the articles, dealing with the trauma that students went through as we were trying to teach them coming out of a pandemic. Engaging the quiet student, another psychological issue with which to deal, and to pull out those students and find ways to make their access to both the entire learning process and particularly composition more efficacious. Periodical also dealt with teacher issues, and several of them: questions of ethics and legislative curricula, issues of pay and recognition, which was addressed by Mr. Banks in his presentation and to us that we both saw and read. And there was an entire study updating the issues surrounding technical and professional communication. The entire issue of September 2020 was dedicated to issues concerning both teachers and students in dual credit courses, which again, part of the reason I'm taking this class and trying to get the master's in English is to be able to teach dual credit courses. There was a fabulous article called Neither Here Nor There, which dealt with issues of the high school students on many levels in a community college environment, and talked about their lacking of maturity or their feelings of being too young for the classes, dealing with older two-year college students, feelings and actions of professors towards the high school students, and the fear the students had that the professors might not treat them as really college students because they're high school students taking college classes. Some other great issues, bringing community to classrooms, and dueling roles, the idea of being a dual instructor, but then having the dueling role of also being, whether the person is a college instructor or a high school instructor, and that hybrid of the two. Some of the main arguments of this, and some of the things that I drew. So given the articles that have appeared of the last 2 years, I can only imagine the trend to incorporate technology, to embrace divergent points of view, to seek to be more inclusive through being more respectful of differences in perspective, ability, and stories of origin. That's only going to continue, because those issues are not going to go away. We're going to continue to find ways to try to include everyone. I would also suggest that English composition rhetoric are meant to be dynamic. I personally enjoy the newest editors' introductory notes when the titles are things like "Don't Panic," which is taken directly from Douglas Adams' book, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because he states that "Don't Panic" is printed in big friendly letters on the back of the book. That was from September 2021, as we're coming out of dealing with pandemic issues and now having students in our classroom who have truly not been students in school for 2 years. Another one of the introductory articles was "Fish Fingers and Custard," which was taken from a Doctor Who episode from March of 2021, talking about how we handle coming into a new environment, being completely new, though we're technically the same person, but we're dealing with new issues. Yes, all things concerning composition need to be rooted in solid forms of recognizable grammar, spelling, vocabulary, and syntax, but language is vibrant. It's vivacious and always in motion. That's what I've really gathered from looking at this journal, and that's what this journal tells me, then expanding to the wider universe of composition studies. Thus, the course of composition rhetoric must not only be all of those things rooted in mutually accepted grammatical principles, but to borrow from Mr. Banks, they must also be funky, free, and flying. We need to have that kind of dynamic back and forth, give and take with our students, and give and take through the writing process. And that's all that I gained from this. And quite honestly, this may be one of those few publications that I may actually subscribe in order to use it more in the future. Thank you very much for your time, and I wish you would have a wonderful day.